One kind of cool thing here is you can edit permissions of this role. And you could see here where you can like edit on hosts and, oh, I don't have the, he's not able to edit permissions on my role. And that was our little checkboxes here. And as you can see now, I can edit users. So the reason I was not able to edit users before was I did not, when I created the role, I intended to do it, but I did not check the boxes that he can edit users and edit permissions, edit tabs. Eventually, this stuff will be grayed so that the user can't even click the button if they don't have permissions to. But at this point, we could come to permissions. Now you can see I'm not grayed out. I can actually apply permissions to this host. And we're going to talk about this here in a minute. I could actually come in, add a folder here for starter, and I can actually apply permissions from this roll down. And this is starting to introduce another very fundamental change that we've made in 1.9, and that is the permissioning system. Permissions have always been very flexible in dotCMS in that you can permission any object. You could get in and permission the content different from the page. So you could go ahead and pull a page and you could make it so certain content would not pull on that page. Permission folders, permission the individual files, all of it was very granular in that respect. Obviously, with power, the key is always getting power, flexibility, and simplicity, right? We all want power, we all want flexibility, but we want it to be simple. And it's easy to write something powerful, it's easy to write something simple. It's the combination of those things with the added flexibility that becomes difficult. Well, I think we've taken a very large step in that direction with the release of 1.9. What you could do now is obviously not only from the roles, is it now easier to just click on a role, edit the role, see who's in the role, removes things from the role, but now you can actually control permissions not only from the objects themselves, but from the role. So you could use this role now, and you could say, on the starter host, for example, or let's click starter host, the home directory. And I could add this guy, and you can see it starts to give us an accordion here. Within this guy, I could come and I could actually on this host now say, okay, folder, I can get one, I can click right up here and provide permissions. These permissions that I'm clicking right here at this top level are actually on the host itself. Then I get some options underneath. For example, folders that are added to this host, will they inherit the permissions that this guy has, yes or no? So that when I create new guys, containers, will they inherit? So this is kind of a default permission that these objects can have. Let's go to our browser for a minute. I'm going to right click on the getting started. One nice improvement, by the way, in the JavaScript for those that are on Mac or on some of the browsers where you had a control click to get the right click working, now you can just right click. You don't need the control anymore. So I'm going to click on the permissions tab here, and you can say no permissions are assigned here yet. But what you could do is there's a button here where you can where you can click and you can get individual permissions on a guy. Let's look at another guy here. Let's look at a guy that's kind of started to be set up, and I think it'll be a little clearer. Okay, so here's a guy that's already set up. He has individual permissions on him, and you could see he has CMS Anonymous set this way. He has the administrator set this way. A nice thing is you can see here, you can cascade your changes still. One thing that used to happen when you cascade changes, though, is you would reset everything underneath it for all roles. One thing that you could do now, and I'm going to hop back and forth here just a little bit, guys. I'm going to click on a role that actually we have some permissions already on. And that guy, you can see here on my home guy, I've set these permissions. In fact, just as a proof of concept, we can click this. We could apply changes on this guy. So what I did here is I applied administrator change on the home folder from the roles portlet. Now, if we refresh our guy here and we go, you could see on the administrator guy, again, don't be confused, this is the CMS anonymous permissions. Here's the permissions for the administrator. You can see our permissions have taken. Now every box is checked as it is here. When you will cascade these changes down, it used to be that you would cascade changes from this guy all the way down, and it would reset for every role. What you could do now is you could cascade from here, and you could just cascade the changes for the administrator role. And that happens sometimes. You add a new role. Here's the scenario. You add a new role. Now, you need to reset permissions from a host and everything underneath it, or a folder and everything underneath it, which has buried nested hierarchy. But that nested hierarchy has different permissions set on it. For example, 2 folders deep, it has different permissions than a sibling folder at the same level. Well, the problem is if you go to host and you just add that new permission and you check, when you blow the permissions down, it would blow everything, all the roles, everything down. There was no way to still keep it individually synced. What you could do now is take a single role and blow just the permissions for that single role down. Huge, huge advantage when it comes terms of management of the site. You get a new department, you get a new section of a site, you add a new role, some new people are now working with you. For those that have tried to do larger scale where you have many, many users, you've run into the types of scenarios that I'm talking about. So this roles guide to set your permissions is very, very handy. In addition to that, I could now add users. So I could take the JSON user here, and of course, we probably shouldn't give that guy any permissions, but assuming we're going to give this guy some permissions, well, I can add him, and this is, again, this is that role where I was talking about. JSON tester is actually a role now, and I could take him, and I can actually assign just to JSON tester permissions on this object and objects nested underneath him. Very, very cool. I can also add a new role here. I want to click, I can click the CMS, well, let's not click that guy, let's click, doesn't really matter here. Let's click the CMS power user. I can click this guy, give him his own permissions, and start, and so forth down the line. I can start adding these guys. In addition to that, I can reset permissions. So what I just did by resetting permissions, notice now everything is grayed out on my guy because these permissions are now being inherited from the roles. These roles have specific permissions set here, and it's inherited from the host, wherever it's coming from. You can see it right here, currently inheriting permissions from system host, because I've removed his permissions, and it's telling me his permissions is being inherited by who? By his parent, and his parent is system host. So whatever system host has is what he gets. And you could see on the administrator it has all this, and the view it has this, or I can click permission individually and actually override his permission. So this allows you to work in 2 different ways. One, I could permission like I used to, where I would individually permission all my different guys, or I could kind of just make everything inherit from above. And it could be that all my permissions are just set on folders. And maybe only certain folders. Maybe everybody inherits from the host. I just have a few departmental folders where I need to go through and set some different permissions on. This gives me the ability to do that. And again, when I add my new role, I could blow those permissions through even to those guys without resetting everybody, meaning other roles, just controlling the role I'm trying to do. And I do that from the roles manager. Extremely powerful compared to where we used to be in power in the terms of simpler to use. What used to take a lot of clicks to do. Now, it's not that you couldn't have done that before, but what used to take a lot of clicks to do is now manageable. It's much easier to see what's happening. It's much easier to control. And in addition to that, you have more power. So as far, I think that we've achieved in 1.9 better than where we came from in that it's simpler, more flexible, and more powerful, and in permissions, which is the very one part of the very core of what we do.